Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It is February 13th, 2026, and if you are anything like me, you are looking at the tech headlines this week and just having this massive sense of déjà vu.
It really feels like we're stuck in a loop, doesn't it?
It really does. I mean,
Yeah.
think back to exactly 1 year ago, February 2025. The industry was, well, I think rattled is maybe putting it mildly, when DeepSeek dropped.
Oh,
It
absolutely.
was this massive shock to the system. It just shattered the assumption that you needed, $10 billion and a private island full of GPUs to build a frontier model.
Right. That was the big efficiency wake-up call. We all suddenly realized you could get GPT-4 level performance for a fraction of the training cost.
But here we are 12 months later, and that wake-up call has become a full-blown siren. We've got a fresh report from Reuters on the desk today, and it confirms the floodgates are officially open.
Wave.
A new wave of extremely low-cost, high-capability Chinese models hitting the global market. And let's be honest, if you're running a P&L, the instinct is pretty primal. You see a tool that's smarter than what you have, and it costs pennies on the dollar. The logic is, plug it in, save the money, get my bonus.
It's the rational economic decision.
Hmm.
Or at least it looks like one on a spreadsheet.
But that is the trap, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's why we're unpacking a really critical analysis today from Johan Steyn. He's an AI thought leader who focuses heavily on where technology, crashes into politics.
Right.
And his take is that if you're just looking at the sticker price of these models, you are missing a massive hidden liability that's lurking right underneath.
He uses a phrase that I think just perfectly captures the era we're in now. He says the headline isn't cheaper AI.
Right.
The headline is that geopolitics has become a design constraint.
Geopolitics as a design constraint. That is a heavy concept.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we usually think of design constraints as what? Battery life or latency or memory.
Not in policy.
Exactly.
We're used to engineering around physics, not around treaties. But Steyn's whole argument is that choosing a model in 2026 is no longer a technical benchmark contest. It's an exposure decision.
An exposure decision.
You're deciding how much geopolitical baggage you are willing to import into your company's stack.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive is to figure out what that actually means for your daily operations. We are not going to talk about benchmarks or token speeds.
No.
We're going to talk about data residency, regulatory exposure, and frankly, who actually owns the brain you're renting.
And this isn't some abstract paranoia. This is about practical nuts and bolts business reality. When you introduce a model through an API, you aren't just importing code, you're importing the entire legal jurisdiction of the host country.
Okay, so let's start with the context, because Steyn talks about the adoption curve in a way that I found really interesting. He argues that the sheer cheapness of these new models has fundamentally broken the old IT procurement model.
It has, completely. Think about the old days, which in AI terms was like, what, 2024? If you wanted to deploy a massive LLM, it was expensive. It required a contract. It required the C-suite to sign off on it.
You had legal review, procurement, 6 months of meetings.
Yeah.
You had a paper trail.
Exactly. It was centralized, but it had to be. Yeah. But now, when a model is affordable, or let's be honest, for all intents and purposes, free experimentation just explodes.
And that leads to what he calls the shadow AI problem.
Yes, but it's different from the old shadow IT we used to talk about.
Our shadow IT used to be, hey, I installed Dropbox on my work laptop because the company file server sucks.
And you could scan the network and find the software.
You could find it.
But shadow AI is, I just piped our entire customer database into a free API to get a sentiment analysis, and I didn't tell anyone.
And because it's just an API key, there's no software to install. IT can't even see it happening on the endpoint half the time.
Precisely. And Steyn makes this critical point. Speed adoption can outpace governance. You have marketing teams, HR teams, developers all trying to move fast. They see a Chinese model that costs pennies and outperforms the approved vendor. They aren't being malicious, they are just trying to be efficient.
They're trying to get the job done. But in doing so, they are creating this fragmented landscape where the CISO has absolutely no idea where the company's data is actually flowing.
Exactly.
And I want to dig into that flow of data because Steyn zooms out here to look at what is happening in Europe. This isn't just a corporate issue. It is a national sovereignty issue.
The digital sovereignty debate, it's really reached a boiling point.
But let's clarify something here because sovereignty gets thrown around a lot. Often it just sounds like protectionism, like Europe trying to block American or Chinese tech just to give their local guys a chance. Is that all this is?
Well, that's the cynical view, and there is certainly an element of that. I mean, the Financial Times just reported on Google warning the EU against erecting walls. The tech giants are arguing that if Europe legislates for local control, they are just going to isolate themselves. But for a business leader, the sovereignty issue is much more technical than just trade wars. It comes down to the difference between data residency and data processing.
Okay, walk me through that distinction. Because I think a lot of people assume, if the server's in Frankfurt, they're safe.
That is the common mistake. Data residency is just where the data sleeps at night. So yeah, maybe your database is in Frankfurt. But when you use an AI model, you are doing inference. You are sending that data somewhere to be processed, to have the math done on it, and then sending the answer back.
So even if my hard drive is physically in Germany, if I send a query to an API, that data packet might travel to a server in Beijing or Shanghai to get processed and then come back.
Exactly. And for that split second or however long the inference takes, your data is subject to the laws of that jurisdiction. You have pierced the sovereignty bubble.
That is a massive, massive distinction. And it leads to what Steyn calls the dual challenge. It's easy to just say, okay, fine, ban all foreign AI. We only use local models.
But you can't really do that, can you? He references The Economist here, and they point out the strategic trap. If the rest of the world, Latin America, Africa, Southeast Asia, is using these incredibly cheap, high-performance Chinese models to optimize their supply chains and write their code.
And you, sitting in Europe or the US, you decide to block them entirely on principle.
You are effectively fighting with one hand tied behind your back. Your cost basis is higher than your competitors. Your innovation cycle might be slower.
So you have this dilemma.
You do. You cannot ignore the efficiency gains, but you cannot blindly accept the security risks.
You have to walk a tightrope. So let's talk about how to walk it. Steyn breaks this down into 3 key lessons for leaders. The first one is model origin matters. But again, I want to push on this. Is this just about the code being buggy or, hidden backdoors?
It's less about Mission Impossible style hacks and more about law and order. It is about legal jurisdiction. Steyn clarifies that the primary risk isn't a hacker, it is a subpoena.
A subpoena.
Think about it. If you are a regulated organization, a bank, a hospital, an insurance company, you hold sensitive data. If your model provider is in a jurisdiction where the government has the legal right to say, hand over all the data from that session,
and the provider has no legal way to refuse.
Right, then you're exposed. You've essentially given a foreign government a window into your internal operations, and you might not even know what happened.
That's terrifying.
And Steyn adds another layer to this, behavior change. We tend to think of models as static products, like buying a toaster.
Right.
But they aren't products, they're services. The provider can update the weights, change the safety filters, or adjust the bias at any moment without telling you.
So if the provider's home government decides that a certain topic is now sensitive, say something about Taiwan or a specific trade tariff, and they force an update?
Your business process changes overnight. Suddenly, your summarizer just stops mentioning that topic, or your risk analysis tool creates a blind spot. It is like a software update that changes your company's values without asking you.
That brings us to the second lesson, and this is the one I really want to drill into because it hits the bottom line. Cheap can be expensive.
This is classic economics applied to the AI era. Steyn distinguishes between inference costs and governance costs.
Inference is the easy one. That's the bill you get from the API provider. The electricity, the compute, that is the number that is just dropping like a stone.
Right, that's the sticker price. But the governance cost, that's the cost of managing the liability. Let's look at the mechanism here because people often miss how this translates to actual dollars.
Okay, give me a scenario.
Okay, take HR. A team sees a cheap model and thinks, great, let's use this to screen the first round of job applicants. It saves them time, it costs pennies.
But HR it's a high-stakes environment.
It is radioactive. If you reject a candidate and that candidate sues for discrimination, you have to go to court. And in court, you need explainability.
You need to prove why the decision was made.
And if you are using a black box model hosted in a jurisdiction with totally opaque data laws,
You're stuck.
you can't explain it. You cannot prove where the data was processed. You cannot prove that the decision wasn't influenced by some hidden bias in the model's training data. You can't produce the logs because the provider isn't obligated to give them to you.
So you lose the lawsuit.
You lose the lawsuit. You pay the fine, and you take the massive reputational hit. So you saved, what, $500 on compute, but you spent $500,000 on legal fees and settlements. That is the governance cost.
That makes the cheap AI the most expensive software you ever bought. Okay, moving to lesson 3. This is where we broaden the map.
Yeah.
Steyn says it's not just U.S. versus China.
This is a crucial corrective. We tend to view everything through this sort of bipolar lens of Washington versus Beijing.
Right.
But Steyn points out that the trend towards sovereign AI is global. He highlights a report from Axios just from February 10th about Pakistan.
Right. Pakistan is moving towards sovereign AI infrastructure.
And the key there is the motivation. They want to keep data within their borders, and they are not alone. We are seeing this from the Middle East to Southeast Asia to South America. Countries are realizing that data is a national asset, much like oil or rare earth minerals, and they want to keep it home.
So what does that mean for a global business? If I'm a multinational, I used to just have one tech stack. I use Salesforce, I use AWS, and I deployed it everywhere.
Those days are ending. We are looking at a future of the splinter net. If you do business in country X, you might be legally required to use a model hosted in country X.
So I might need a Brazilian AI for my Sao Paulo office and a German AI for my Munich office.
Exactly. Expect more localization requirements, expect sector-specific restrictions. It's becoming a patchwork quilt of compliance. You can't just have a global AI strategy anymore. You need a multi-local AI strategy.
This sounds incredibly messy.
It is an operational nightmare for CIOs, but it is the reality of 2026.
So let's pivot to the practical application. If I'm listening to this and I'm a CEO or I'm sitting on our board or I'm the poor CISO trying to manage this mess, what do I actually do? I can't just stop using AI.
No, and Steyn is very clear on that. You cannot opt out of the revolution, but you need to shift the mindset. The question is no longer which model is the best, as in, which one has the highest IQ score on a benchmark.
The question is,
Which model is appropriate for this specific data?
he suggests a tiering approach.
Yes. Think of it like a security clearance system for your data. You need to categorize your workflows. So tier 1 is low risk.
And this is stuff like
What?
drafting internal summaries of public news articles, brainstorming marketing taglines, stuff that if it leaked or if the model was a bit biased, it wouldn't kill the company.
For that, you can use the cheap stuff. Go ahead, leverage the efficiency of the global market. Use the cheap models. But then you have tier 2, medium risk, maybe internal memos, creative content that hasn't been released. And then tier 3, high risk.
The crown jewels.
Finance, HR records, patient health data, strategic planning, regulated client decisions. For this tier, the rules change completely. You do not shop for price here.
You shop for safety.
You need a model that runs in your own private cloud or a domestic model with ironclad data guarantees. You do not send your employee health records to a low-cost API hosted in a jurisdiction you don't trust just to save 3 cents per query.
That distinction is key. Categorize the work, then pick the tool. Don't pick the tool and try to jam all the work into it. Okay, what about the security folks, the CISOs? Steyn gives them a golden rule.
Yes. Insist on auditability.
If you can't log it, you can't use it.
Basically. If you cannot get reliable logs, if you don't have clear data handling commitments or enforceable contracts, the model is not enterprise ready. It doesn't matter if it scores 100% on a reasoning benchmark. If you can't audit it, it is a liability.
He also touches on reputational risk here. And I thought this was a subtle point. The public usually doesn't care if you use foreign tech. They care if you lie about it.
Right. The backlash rarely comes just because a model is foreign. I mean, people use TikTok, they use all sorts of global apps. The backlash comes from secrecy. It comes from negligence.
Right.
If something goes wrong, if data leaks or a model spits out something harmful, and your answer is, we don't know why it happened, and we don't know where our customer data is, that is what destroys your reputation.
It's the cover-up or the incompetence that gets you. Finally, briefly, what about the policymakers? Because they are the ones writing these rules that are making our lives so complicated.
Steyn references Project Syndicate here, specifically regarding Europe, and the advice is to be pragmatic. He calls it raising the floor. Instead of just banning things or building walls, which we know Google and the economists hate established shared standards for provenance, make it so that any model, whether it's from San Francisco, Shanghai, or Paris, has to meet a certain baseline of transparency to play in the market.
So you can sell here, but you have to show your work.
Exactly. It's about creating a safe ecosystem rather than a closed one.
So let's bring this all together. What is the big picture for our listener today?
The big picture is that the era of AI innocence is over. We are entering a world of accessible, low-cost AI driven largely by this 2026 wave of Chinese models. And that is a genuine opportunity for innovation and efficiency.
It comes with a tax.
A geopolitical tax. As Steyn puts it, geopolitics is now embedded in everyday technology decisions. You cannot separate the code from the country of origin anymore.
I love how he closes the article. He says, in 2026, asking which AI are we running is a leadership question, not a technical one.
It really is. It requires a multi-model strategy. You have to balance capability, cost, and trust. You can't just hand this off to the IT department and hope for the best. It is a strategic risk decision that belongs in the boardroom.
It really changes how you look at your software, doesn't it? But we're so used to thinking about bugs or uptime or user interface. But now we have to think about international relations when we pick a spell checker.
It connects the micro to the macro in a way we haven't really seen before in software. It's a brave new world.
Well, that brings us to the end of this deep dive. But before we go, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We talked about geopolitics being a design constraint.
Right.
Think about what that actually means for the longevity of your business. We are all used to software updates, breaking things, and API changes and your app crashes. We accept that as part of the job.
Sure. It's annoying, but we deal with it.
But if our tech stack is now tied to national borders, what happens when political alliances shift overnight? What happens if a trade war escalates on a Tuesday? And suddenly the API that powers your customer support is sanctioned on a Wednesday.
That is a disturbing thought.
Right. We might need to get used to the idea that it's not just bad code that breaks our systems, but that foreign policy might be the bug that crashes your entire operation.
And fortunately, there is no patch for that.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next Deep Dive.